So for you to talk about superstitious savages writing the Bible, you are so out of touch with reality, it's scary.
You idiots.
Pardon? No, it's okay. Think, man. I like talking to you. You're a delight to talk to. Thanks for...
I ask myself, is your explanation more plausible, or is the explanation that there's an intelligent mind more plausible?
So God was
It's a
always
no-brainer.
there. There was always an intelligent mind, just always.
Correct. Versus your explanation, which is there was always matter and energy. Fine. If there's always matter and energy, if that's all there is to reality, then where do free will, love, and justice come?
Creation of man.
Sir, if I don't have free will, I don't create anything because there's no I. There's no me. I'm a machine.
So here's the story of the birth of Jesus. You
Yes.
mentioned that yourself, how he was
Yes.
born in Bethlehem.
Uh-huh.
If we go to the Gospels to look at this, to see what the Gospels have to say about the birth of Jesus, only 2 of the Gospels actually say anything about it. The rest of them pick up as he is an adult.
Yep.
And the 2 stories given are incompatible.
I've gotten to the point where I want to believe in Christ, but I just can't bring myself, I guess, emotionally to that point.
Okay, what's the block?
I really don't know.
Okay.
I guess I've had friends that help me try to understand Jesus or tell me about Jesus more in the past year, I guess.
Right.
And I've gotten to the point where I want to believe in Christ, but I just can't bring myself, I guess, emotionally to that point.
Okay, what's the block?
I really don't know.
Okay. Cliff, do you like Coke or Pepsi? I don't know, sir. I'm agnostic. That's a possibility. I don't know. Coke or Pepsi? I don't know. I'm agnostic. Agnosticism means I don't know. Cliff, do you believe in God? I don't know. I'm agnostic. That's not possible. Why? Because the fundamental issues of life, the value of this person, the value of you, the value of this person, is all tied up with, are they a creation of God or are they a cosmic accident? And you've got to treat yourself and others as if you have value, or no, you don't have any value. So you don't have an option. You can't say, I don't know. So the decision that you make to view yourself as being valuable, her as being valuable, her as being valuable, shows whether you believe in God or not. Because if you treat them with value, the question is why? And if they really are cosmic accidents, there's no difference between her and a cockroach. You step on a cockroach, why don't you step on her? Secondly, purpose. Obviously, the way you articulate and dress convinces me you're not agnostic. You got a pretty good understanding that there is some type of purpose to life, and you're going after it. Congratulations. I respect you. But remember, if there is no God, no meaning to life, ultimately. Sure, I can create my own meaning. But if I create my own meaning today and contradict it tomorrow, no problem. Because I created meaning today, I create it tomorrow, and if it contradicts what I created today, it's meaningless. You can't live that way, I don't think. It's pretty hard. Third point, you got to choose. Cheat on the exam, don't cheat on the exam. Pressure to get into med school, law school, whatever is hard. Pay your taxes, don't pay your taxes, cheat, lie, steal. See, every day you have to make ethical decisions, and those ethical decisions tattle what you believe about reality. You can't be agnostic, because either there are moral absolutes, or it's all a cosmic crapshoot. And then fourthly, unfortunately, you got to go to Grandma and Grandpa's funeral. And one day, Mom and Dad's funeral, if you haven't already. And I don't think as a thinking human being, as articulate as you are, sir, that you can just say, I'm not going to think about it. No, you're either going to see them again one day, or you ain't going to see them again one day. Either this really stinks and hurts, because you love the living daylights out of them, and now they're dead and no longer alive, and that's case closed. Or else you might see them again one day. See, you can't be agnostic because of those 4 issues, which are so fundamental to the way you live your life. You can't escape those issues. You can escape Coke or Pepsi, I'm agnostic. It really doesn't matter. But God, Christ, you can't. What would you say, Stuart?
Well, Taka, thank you for your honesty, because the majority of people aren't there. The majority of people will say it's all intellectual, and I'm just thinking through this, and I've never gotten a revelation. See, God has to reveal himself some way. But you're talking about emotional bias that are on both ends. See, I have an emotional bias where I want to see my dad again in heaven, my kids again in heaven, my family members. So I got to be careful not to judge a worldview simply because I have this emotional bias to see family members again one day, once we all pass on. But the other end of the spectrum is the emotional bias of, I want to live for me, myself, and I. I don't want God to tell me how I need to live sexually or how I need to live in terms of giving my money away or any number of these things. So I love that you're looking inward because, I hate to say it, as unbiased as scientists claim to be, scientists are very emotionally biased. I got that recently from one great cosmologist who said, just about every single scientist I know in my field, if you really press them on it, will admit it ain't real science that they're going after. It's their own scientific theories and what they want these theories to be. Albert Einstein himself, what did he say? I had said that there was ultimately the universe was eternal because I didn't want there to be something that created this place, God. So he came up with a fudge factor. He fudged things to make it look like it was eternal. But what did he do? He repented. And he said, I apologize. I cheated the science because I didn't want there to be a God. But the universe did have a beginning, so I know that there must be someone who started it. If there's a big bang, there must be a big banger. So even Einstein, like you, wrestled with that emotional bias. I was at Yale University not too long ago, and this kid kept pressing me. You could see the emotional bias come out. He kept saying, oh, this question, Old Testament slavery. Then he would switch to head coverings and women's. The Bible has all these issues. But we got down to it, and I said, okay, so those are your real issues? Why did you just shoot like 15 at me? Seems like more of an emotional thing. And he said, fine, I want to sleep around with as many women as possible. And I said, thank you. Thank you, finally, for your honesty. After all this whole hour of us debating, thank you for your honesty. You want to sleep around with as many people as possible. So looking inward and saying, hey, I want to be an honest truth seeker is dealing a lot of it with that emotional bias.
Are you familiar with like the children's game Telephone where one kid just messes with the other kid and by the time it gets to the end it's completely perfect? Yeah? Well, you realize there is no original text of the Bible left anywhere on this world? It is all copies of copies. So how can you go back to the original documentation? How can you put such faith in this? We don't even have anything original. It's just someone that copied something. And it's like the game of Telephone. How do you know that what you're seeing is even anything like what the original thing was?
Do we have any original copies of Herodotus?
What?
Do we have any original copies of Herodotus?
Not personally.
Do we have any original copies of Caesar's Gallic Wars? Do we have any original copies of Suetonius, Tacitus? Do we have any original copies of any document
Do we
from
have
ancient
people who
history?
worship those people?
No, we don't have any of those original documents. Therefore, according to what I hear you saying is, it's all bunk. Because we don't have any of the original documents. Garbage. We have many copies that agree, going back to a very, very early date. And that's why we have study of Greek history, study of Roman history, study of Muhammad.
So we should have to study the Bible, but we shouldn't base our whole lives on it.
Good, study it and find out, is Jesus reliable? And if the evidence is that Jesus is reliable, put your faith, your trust in him, and grow closer to
Go
him.
back to evidence, though, again. There is no evidence.
Yes, there is. There's lots of historical evidence that Caesar fought the Gallic Wars. There's lots of historical evidence.
You talk about Jesus being reliable.
Yeah?
Well, there's evidence that he existed, but there's no evidence of him being reliable.
There's historical information about how he treated people, what he taught ethically, how he died, loving and forgiving his enemies, and how he rose from the dead.
Yeah, and there's plenty of evidence of people who know me that I'm a good guy and I treat people and everything, but I still lie, cheat, and steal.
That's why I don't worship.
Please, you have only certain things to go by. You're saying you have certain major acts to go by, and you're saying everything you did was perfect. There's probably not a kid there who didn't try to steal a candy bar from a candy store when they were a kid. People steal. People lie. So you're taking a few pages out of everything he did in his life and saying, oh, that's reliable. Everything he says must be true.
Those disciples observed him carefully for 3 years. So you could observe me carefully for 1 week, and you'd have more than enough evidence that I am a sinner. But these guys examined Jesus for 3 years, and they never saw him sin. And in John chapter 8, Jesus looks in the faces of his enemies and says, which one of you can prove me guilty of sin? And his enemies were silent. The evidence is the guy lived a sinless life. Well, that demands respect, doesn't it? I'm sure I can promise you, if you lived a sinless life, forget it. If you lived like Mother Teresa, I'd have a ton of respect for you. If you lived a sinless life, even better than Mother Teresa, I'd have a whole lot of respect for you. Then if you died and rose from the dead, I'd be following you around.
You see the movie Contact? Right? You see the movie Contact? It made popular a really major philosophical point called Occam's razor. Simplest explanation, all things being equal, generally being true. What makes more sense? What's simpler? That he was a man, said some good things that people listened to, or that he was the Son of God that rose from the dead? What's simpler? All things being equal, which would you believe?
What's simpler, to believe that the order and the design of the cosmos comes from an intelligent mind, or to believe that it's a giant accident?
But you don't put that, all you do is put the question back one further step by saying it's God. The universe is here, it doesn't make sense, it's so amazing. What happened? Oh, God created. Well, who created God? Oh, he was always there. Well, so why wasn't the universe just always there? All you do is put the question back one step and then put it out of your mind and say it was God. He created the universe. Who created God? If he was always there, why couldn't the universe be?
There are only 4 answers that I know to the question, what is eternal? First one, in the beginning there was nothing. That great philosopher Julie Andrews once sang, nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. Therefore, I rule out the first option, in the beginning there was nothing. Second option, in the beginning there was matter and energy. Matter and energy does not allow for free will, love, justice as being real values. My experience in life teaches me that love, justice, and free will are very real, very big parts of my enjoyment of life. Third option, in the beginning there's an intelligent mind who creates a complex cosmos, sets it ticking, steps back, and is uninvolved. Deism, a la Thomas Jefferson. Makes some sense to me. Fourth option, in the beginning there's an intelligent mind, creates, and actually wants to interact with you and me, actually loves you and me. That's what Jesus Christ insisted on. So those are the only 4 options that I know. And the reason that I cannot accept your option that the universe is eternal is, it means you're convinced that matter and energy describes all there is. My experience in life tells me there's a lot more to reality than matter and energy.
So the universe isn't eternal, but God is, right? What did God, what was it? What was God before there was a universe for him to exist in?
God is personal. God is not an it.
So there was no universe for God to exist in, right?
And I don't know what God was doing before he created the earth. And to be quite honest with you, it really doesn't matter to me right now. No offense to God, no offense to you.
All you do is put it one step further back and then forget about it.
I do not. I ask myself, is your explanation more plausible, or is the explanation that there's an intelligent mind more plausible?
So God was always there. There was always an intelligent mind, just always.
Correct. Versus your explanation, which is there was always matter and energy. Fine. If there's always matter and energy, if that's all there is to reality, then where do free will, love, and justice come?
Creation of man.
Sir, if I don't have free will, I don't create anything because there's no I. There's no me. I'm a machine. If all of reality is matter and energy, I'm a machine, you're a machine. That's all there is.
Not a census. That census absolutely never happened. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you go back to your hometown to do a census. That would be completely economically disruptive. Also, King Herod was died before the alleged time Jesus was born.
Really? What's the alleged time Jesus was born?
0 BC. Or
No.
year 0.
That's a mistake that the monk made who put the calendar together. You're absolutely correct. Jesus was born in 5 or 4 BC. The monk who put together our calendar made a mistake. So good history.
But the census never happened, though.
Oh, the census never happened? Of course it did.
No, the census.
Censuses were taken by the Roman Empire. Yes, they were taken.
But there wasn't one recorded that year.
Well, what was the year Christ was born?
Any time of that year.
He wasn't born in 0.
It doesn't matter. I'm talking about any of that time.
Yes, it does matter.
Like, think about the census. Why would you go back to your hometown for a census? That doesn't even make any sense.
Of course it makes sense.
Why does
If
it
the
make-
law of the land is you are to be numbered in your hometown, then you go back to your hometown to be numbered.
No, but think about it for a second. Why? The point of the census is to know where people are living now, not where people were born.
Well, that's a great bias that you and I might have living in our culture. But guess what? This is a culture that existed 2,000 years ago called Roman culture.
Okay.
All right, a little different from American culture. And I think it's rather culturally arrogant for me to say, oh, the Romans couldn't take that type of census 2,000 years ago. Give me a break.
It would,
The Romans didn't do it the American way, guys, just in case you're wondering.
that kind of census would have destroyed the economy.
No, it wouldn't have destroyed the
Yes, it would,
economy.
because people aren't working if they're going back to their hometowns hundreds of miles away.
People usually didn't live hundreds of miles away from their hometown in that day, sir. There were no airplanes. There were no automobiles.
What if you're a month walks away, month trip away? That's still going to be extremely economically disruptive.
Yeah, very few people lived that far away from the place they were born in that time. To study the culture. You didn't grow up 2,000 years ago in a town and then move to the opposite side of the Roman Empire to live your life. There was not that kind of communication and travel.
It still doesn't make any sense. Why would a census care about where you used to live and not where you actually live?
I don't have the faintest idea what matter. What does it matter?
Why is there no record of the census from an outside secular source?
There are records of censuses from outside sources.
In that time, and also, there is no record outside of the Bible of Herod trying to kill a bunch of babies. That would have definitely been written down.
How small was Bethlehem? Very small town. How many babies did Herod kill? Very small number. You're trying to convince me that the Roman Empire, that committed incredible war atrocities, is going to record a few babies slaughtered in Bethlehem? Give me a break. We're not going to do that.
The Romans wrote pretty much everything down. That's what we know so much about them.
Who did?
The Romans?
No, they did not write everything down.
They wrote everything down.
No, they did not.
Studied this. They wrote so much
Yeah, I'd
down.
like to study it also.
Okay.
No, they did not write everything down. Nobody writes everything down. And when you go back to ancient history, sir, you have an even sparser historical record.
Okay. Let's move on from that. Here's another. Are you trying to argue the Old Testament is historically accurate too?
That was not what we were talking about. This lady raised a question. I was answering about the New Testament.
But are you? Do you believe the Old Testament is literally true?
Sir, I read everything literally, which means I respect literary style and I read in context.
No.
I read fairy tale literally as fairy tale. I read biology literally as biology. I read historical narrative literally as historical narrative. And if this man uses allegory to interpret him, I respect his right to use allegory or metaphor or simile.
Do you believe that the Bible is literally true? That's what I'm asking. It is historically accurate to 100% or whatever percent.
I am convinced the Quran is very, very historically accurate. I am convinced that the Bible is very historically accurate. I am convinced that the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha have been accurately preserved. And if you want to find out what Siddhartha Gautama Buddha taught, you'd be very wise to read the teachings of Siddhartha.
But that's not what I asked you.
Yes, it is what you asked me.
Are you a biblical literalist? That's what I'm asking. Do you believe that the Word of God is 100% historically accurate? You're not answering my question.
Yes, I am. What you should be saying is, I'm not fitting into the stereotype that you have in your head. You're right, I'm not. Instead, I'm trying to explain myself a little more clearly than the stereotype that you have in your head of a literalist. No, I'm not a literalist as you define literalism. And I'm outlining to you how any thinking person needs to learn to interpret any text. You've got to learn to respect literary style. If you interpret a biology textbook the same way you interpret the poem of John Donne or Robert Blake, you will flunk. You better learn to distinguish between a poem, an historical narrative, and a scientific text. And if you don't learn to distinguish between those three different literary styles, you will flunk.
Okay, okay. Here, let me put it another way.
Good.
Do you believe Noah's flood happened as described in the Bible?
Yes, I believe Noah's flood happened as described in the Bible. I am not convinced that Genesis insists that there was a universal flood, in the same way that when the Apostle Paul says, I preach the gospel to the whole earth, that doesn't mean he went to Australia and South America. He went to the whole known world around the Mediterranean of that day. Okay? So I don't know the extent of the flood at the time of Noah. But have there been incredible floods? All you got to do, sir, is read the Gilgamesh epic. And from another culture, you've got a very clear description of a massive flood.
Okay.
How massive was it? I don't know. And guess what? The Bible does not give the diameter of the floodwaters. Doesn't do that.
I'm trying to gauge your historical, what kind of historicity you believe in. Do you believe the Exodus happened as described in the Bible?
Yes.
Well, there's no evidence for that.
Well, how much evidence do you expect?
Well,
From a group of people who walk through the desert, you honestly think that 3,000 years after it occurred,
Yes.
we're going to have a bunch of artifacts
Yes,
about a group of people passing through a desert?
there's 1.5 million of them. Yes, we would.
No, we would not.
Yes,
They
we
were
would.
nomadic.
The desert is the best preservation of ancient
Really?
artifacts.
And
Yeah.
how much archaeological evidence do we have for the teepees that Native
You
Americans
don't
had?
have to. People wrote it down because they saw them.
Come on, sir. You got to start thinking. You're not going to have a lot of archaeological evidence from nomads. Nomads traveled. They didn't build pyramids. Now, we got pyramids because the Egyptians lived in Egypt and they built the pyramids.
Well, we would be able to-
Profound archaeological evidence. When you've got nomads traveling about all over the place, for you to demand a bunch of archaeological evidence, like pottery or
Okay.
whatever, that's highly naive.
How do you get lost in the desert for 40 years? There are millions of people living in that part of the world. Why did none of them ask for directions? And why did nobody write a 1.5 million, even notice a 1.5 million people just crossing the desert aimlessly?
Where on earth does the Bible say that it was 1.5 million?
It says it in the text.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't say 1.5 million people were part of the Exodus.
Even if it's like 100,000, you can't just do that.
Well, that's a good qualification there. You went from 1.5 million to
No,
100,000.
even if they're it doesn't matter. This kind of scale, people would have noticed. And plus, it's only 300 miles from Memphis, Egypt, to freaking Jerusalem.
Yeah.
If you put, if they were walking in a straight line, the first person would have gotten to Israel before the last person even left.
Sir, your hyper-skepticism is totally out of touch with reality. You cannot deal with anything from history with the type of hyper-skepticism you have.
I can deal
For
with
you to
archaeology.
demand that either 1.5 million or 100,000 people left artifacts that 3,000 years later we can dig up on their nomadic trip.
Yes,
You've
but
got to be kidding me, sir.
tons of-
That is so hyper-skeptical, it's scary.
Okay, but what happened? Why did nobody else write them down when they were wandering around? And what happened? You can find out if they were there. They would have left tons of freaking trash everywhere.
Trash. And you expect trash to
Yes.
hang around for 3,000
You know what
years in the
it is?
desert?
What is a midden? What is a midden in archaeology? What is a midden?
I don't have the faintest idea what a midden
It's a
is.
trash pit, and pretty much every ancient civilization had them at the time. We'd be able to find them. I worked at an archaeology site in freaking Arizona. They had a midden, and from that we were able to tell what they ate, when they ate it. Period.
Great. How many years ago was that?
700 years ago.
Fine. Now, just multiply that by 4 plus,
Wait.
and you've got an incredible...
Okay. We've got the number here. How many? 600,000. That's men. That's insane. Like, there's no way nobody would have noticed that 600,000 people were wandering in one of the most highly populated places on the planet.
Desert?
No, the Nile Delta.
Sir, your hyperskepticism is not consistent across the study of ancient history. If you apply the type of unrealistically stringent tests to the writings of Herodotus, the Greek historian, to the writings of the Roman historians, you've just dismissed Alexander the Great with one big
Dude, like,
sweep of the arm.
Herodotus wasn't claiming that a miracle from God happened. Like, seriously, like magic. Like parting of the Red Sea, bread raining from the sky. Herodotus never mentioned anything like that. So it's a lot more substantially believable.
Thanks for your honesty. Now we're getting to the real issue, which has nothing to do with history. It has to do with a philosophical presupposition, which is there a supernatural God who performs miracles, or is there no supernatural God who performs miracles? And obviously, if there's no supernatural God, then miracles are impossible. You're right. But let's be honest, it's not an issue of history, it's an issue of philosophy. Is there a supernatural God or not? Now, what do you think?
No,
Okay, why do you think there's no God?
because miracles are nonsense.
Because miracles are nonsense.
And like, I believe in the laws of physics.
Yeah?
But
No, sir, let him speak. You got the
No.
floor, go ahead.
I believe in the laws of physics,
Right.
and you can't move water like for 600,000 people to go through.
Okay.
Like, you can't move water like that.
Good,
Or you can't, bread is not gonna magically rain from the sky.
good,
Like,
very good.
what causes that? How does your God create miracles? What causes that?
Bible, a miracle is simply based on the supernatural God who initially created the laws of nature, changing a law, performing what you and I call a miracle. Totally reasonable,
Are you kidding me?
absolutely reasonable. If you allow for a supernatural God, it is totally reasonable for this supernatural God to change a law that he created in the first place, the law of gravity, and change
Well,
how he makes bread.
I don't think you know what you keep conflating like congressional laws with like physics laws. It's just laws are an expansion of the properties of like the world around us. They aren't some like law that is created by a god. But seriously, there is no evidence of you can break any of these laws of physics. You don't have evidence of any of that. Like, your bread cannot magically rain from the sky. You cannot turn water into wine without a nuclear explosion going off. Where else should I go? You can't walk on water.
Right. You and I cannot walk on water.
Nobody can.
If there's a supernatural God who becomes man in Jesus Christ, he can walk on water.
You cannot raise the dead.
You're right. If there is no God, when you die, you rot. When I die, I rot. But if there is a God who gave us life in the first place, then it's totally reasonable, if he chooses, that he could give us life after death.
I don't think you know what reasonable means.
Well, then why don't you inform me what reasonable means?
Well, it's something that it means something could be divided for reason. And like, we have no reason to like believe any of that happens. Like, why are you trusting the word of a bunch of superstitious savages?
Sir, when you read the Ten Commandments, when you read the Sermon on the Mount, those are not superstitious savages.
No.
As Robert Coles, professor emeritus at Harvard, put it, all the writings on ethics over the past 2,000 years are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount.
Well, I'm not talking about the old.
So for you to talk about superstitious savages writing the Bible, you are so out of touch with reality, it's scary.
You idiots.
Pardon? No, it's okay. Think, man. I like talking to you. You're a delight to talk to. Thanks for... My tests are 4 in number. Internal consistency, literary style, archaeological evidence, and manuscript evidence. First one, internal consistency. Whenever I read any document that claims to be historically accurate, I'm a skeptic, but not a cynic. And so I look for contradictions within this historical record. If the contradictions exist, my skepticism rises.
If there's an internal consistency, I begin to trust the document a little bit more. Second test, literary style. Is the literary style of the document, once upon a time in the land of Nod, Wynken, Blynken, and Odd took a boat ride? That's not historical narrative, that's fairy tale. So if it's fairy tale, as a literary style, I'm not going to trust it to give me accurate historical information. When you read the Gospels, you'll notice the literary style is historical narrative. At this time, in this place, with these people around, Jesus said this, he did that. Third test, archaeology. Was Jesus born on the island of Atlantis? If he was, I got a problem with the text, because archaeology does not verify the existence of the island of Atlantis. But in reality, Jesus was born, according to the Gospels, in Bethlehem, archaeologically verifiable. Fourth test. How do we know that we have what those guys wrote nearly 2,000 years ago? Have you ever played the game telephone? You sit in a circle, you whisper a secret into the ear of the person next to them, they whisper it into the ear of the person next to them, and by the time the secret reaches the end of the circle, it's totally perverted. Yes, I have played that game. No, that is not how we have the Gospels handed down to us. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that we have today are right from the original Greek, which is the language they were written in. We have over 5,200 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript, all agreeing to a very precise detail. So the manuscript evidence for the veracity of the Gospels historically is overwhelming. So I just read the Gospels as history, and that's what I ask all you to do. Read the Gospels as history and ask yourself, does the historical evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead point to his credibility or not?
On the subject of internal consistency, the Bible isn't actually all that great at that. I could give you some examples if you like.
Yeah, let's stick with the Gospels, okay?
All right. So here's the story of the birth of Jesus. You mentioned that yourself, how he was born in Bethlehem. If we go to the Gospels to look at this, to see what the Gospels have to say about the birth of Jesus, only 2 of the Gospels actually say anything about it. The rest of them pick up as he is an adult.
Yep.
And the 2 stories given are incompatible. In one story, Jesus is born, and then Herod, who has been given warning of this event, he decides to massacre the children. And to avoid this, Jesus and his mother flee to Egypt, and then later they go to Nazareth. But in the other one, Jesus is born, and then they stay there for 40 days to, I think there's some event, I think, that they're staying for, and then they go to Nazareth. So we see an inconsistency.
Okay. What do you think history is? Do you think there's any book on any portion of history that includes every detail of what happened?
No.
Good. So you agree with me that history is a selective account of what happened?
Yes.
Okay. That's what you have in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You have 4 independent accounts that are selective accounts of what happened. It's like this. You and I are standing down on Guadalupe. We see 2 cars coming down the road. We hear a screech of brakes. We hear a woman scream, and then there's a collision. You and I go to the police department. You say, "Officer, I saw the 2 cars coming down the street. I heard a screech of brakes. There was a collision." I say, "Officer, I saw the 2 cars coming down the street. I heard a woman scream, and there was a collision." Are you and I contradicting each other?
No.
Thank you. We're offering 2 equally valid perspectives on what really happened. Just because one gospel talks about the trip to Egypt and the other is silent about the trip to Egypt, there is no contradiction between a statement in one book and silence in another. A contradiction would be, they went to Egypt, they never went to Egypt. Then we would have a problem.
But the massacre that Herod committed and the subsequent move to Egypt is a highly significant event.
Really?
In the context of this story they're telling about the birth of Jesus.
Of what significance to your life and my life today is it that Herod slaughtered a bunch of babies in Bethlehem?
Well, the problem here isn't the significance to our life today, but the significance to the story of Jesus. And on that point, it's actually fairly significant.
Please explain why.
Well, because they're trying to tell the story of the birth of Jesus, right? And in one story, there's this guy who wants to kill Jesus, so they have to run away to Egypt. And then in the other story, they never say anything about this guy, and they never say anything about going to Egypt.
If Jesus is God in human form, come to save you and me from despair, guilt, death, and hell, of what significance is it that Herod killed a bunch of people in Bethlehem?
Okay, so apparently me and you have different views on the subject of the importance of this particular subject.
Well, I have not heard from you an explanation of why it is so significant that Herod killed a bunch of babies in Bethlehem.
Because he was trying to kill Jesus.
Yeah, and he didn't succeed. He didn't succeed. Sir, do you know how many Jews were killed by Romans at that time? The Romans were barbaric people. The Romans slaughtered many Jews all the time. In fact, the Romans nailed Jews to crosses on a real regular basis. Just because the Gospels don't record all of that doesn't mean they're unreliable, because they didn't record that. See, history, sir, is a selective account of what happened. If someone writes a U.S. history book and doesn't include the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, is that automatically an unreliable U.S. history book?
Not necessarily.
Good.
If it claims to be a comprehensive U.S. history book, then certainly it's unreliable.
Okay. All right.
But that's not the only subject on which there is an inconsistency. Would you agree to me that Jesus' most important sermon is a significant event in his life, which any writer of the story of Jesus as the Son of God would want to include in their tale?
I can promise you, sir, we do not have a precise record of the most important sermon that Jesus taught.
Have you ever heard of the Sermon of the Mount? Sermon on... All right.
Yes.
That only appears in one of the Gospels. That's only in one of the Gospels. There's another sermon which is very similar in time and content in another of the Gospels, but that is delivered on the plains.
Yeah.
And then neither of the other two Gospels mention anything about it, and John the Baptist seemed to be unaware of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea how many years I have spoken in Austin?
No.
Good. Because it's been a lot. And I can promise you, over the past 20 years of speaking on this fine campus, I have repeated myself, I have said different things, and if someone were to write a record of what I've said out on this West Mall, it would be very different from what someone else would record, because I've said a lot, I've repeated myself, I've done some really unique things that I regret, that I'm not going to repeat. So, you're grappling with, what does it mean to give a record? And the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7 is not a claim that Jesus gave this thing all from beginning to end, and this was it. That Sermon on the Mount has a lot of different sayings that Jesus undoubtedly said not just once, not just on a mount, not just on a plain, sir, but a lot of other times. That's why the oral tradition was so strong, because Jesus repeated himself and repeated himself. He spoke in parables. I hope you don't think he gave the parable of the Good Samaritan just once.
No.
Good. So if one gospel writer were to record that Jesus gave the parable of the Good Samaritan on a mountaintop, and another would say he gave the parable of the Good Samaritan in a boat on the Sea of Galilee, sir, that's not a contradiction. The same way that if someone records that Cliff said this in one place, and he said the same thing in another place, that's not a contradiction, sir. It's not a problem. Right?
All right.
Okay, but let me make one quick more comment. You see, sir, I am very, very frustrated with the dishonesty of some, not all, some religion professor who critique the New Testament by doing exactly what you've just been doing. What I mean is, it is intellectually dishonest to have such a precise requirement that everything line up perfectly. And if everything doesn't line up perfectly, it's obviously erroneous. See, that's intellectually dishonest. Why? Because if you go to any other document and you apply the same stringent test to that other document that these religion professors are applying to the New Testament, you'd blow that book right out of the water. You see, so the lack of ability to be consistent in those stringent textual criticism, that really disturbs me. I don't think it's intellectually honest.
All right.
Does that make any sense?
Yes. All right. So I'll waive the internal consistency bit for now.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you and I respect you. You need to hear me, okay?
Okay.
Sometimes talking to people, I feel like, man, they're not listening to me and we're not getting anywhere. But I really appreciate that.
All right.
Respect you.
So there was internal consistency, writing
Literary style,
historical evidence, and
No. Internal consistency, literary style,
archaeological evidence, and
manuscript.
and manuscript
Yes,
evidence.
sir.
Yes. Isn't literary style more a function of how it is how it is chosen to be written, than any truth or falsehood of the tale?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. But then it shows intent, right? If I say to you, once upon a time, and then I say to you, yesterday I was out here speaking on this West Mall.
Yes.
Those are two different claims. I better be honest in the intent that I'm communicating to you. You know, once upon a time, I'm not implying that this really happened. But if I say to you, yesterday, Tuesday, November 17th, I was standing out here and this is what I said, you better take that differently than when I say, well, you know, once upon a time, Hansel and Gretel went up a hill to fetch a pail of water.
Yes. So, but it doesn't change any of the content. It's just a matter of intent, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, if my intent is to communicate to you truth about where I was yesterday, then I use a style that says, at this time in this place, this is where I was. If I say once upon a time, I'm not communicating specificity, I'm not communicating an accurate event.
Right. But the Bible has been translated many times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of this translation was done by people who had an intent about the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, like, have you ever, the Council of Nicaea, I think, that there was a few people who specifically chose books, like books that had been written about Jesus, and took these together and said, this is the New Testament of the Bible. All right? So if you have a number of documents and you want to choose, and they certainly had an agenda. They certainly believed that Jesus was God. So the ones that they choose would be the ones whose intent matched their own intent, wouldn't it?
Okay, great point. Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code got a few things mixed up. The Council of Nicaea, sir, did not determine the New Testament. The Council of Nicaea struggled through the identity of Christ. How was the New Testament, the 27 books of the New Testament, put together? It was put together over a long period of time by the eyewitnesses, by those who knew the eyewitnesses, by those who knew them. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were accepted as authoritative right in the first century. They were read as authoritative. So were Paul's writings in the second century. Hebrews, 2 Peter, 2nd and 3rd John, Jude, lots of questions, into the 200s even. It was two councils at the end of the 4th century, in 393 and 397 AD, the Council of Hippo Regius and the Council of Carthage, that finally put their stamp of approval on what had already been decided. These 27 New Testament books are the New Testament canon.
All right,
So the Council of
thank you
Nicaea
for
had
the
any-
correction. I must have mixed up some things I read.
It's all right, don't worry, man.
So it's I'm having a hard time deciding how to put this.
Just put it out there.
Certainly there's a lot of... All right, have you ever heard of the story of George Washington cutting down the cherry tree?
Yeah,
All right. That never happened. That's not an actual thing that George Washington did.
good. How do you know that?
Well, we know that because we know exactly who made it up. We know that there was a person who admired George Washington and wanted George Washington thought of as a great person, and he created this story.
Good.
And this happened 200 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And it's, something we've all heard and something we've all thought about. So this intentional creation of something that didn't happen to aggrandize a person,
Uh-huh.
we have records of this happening, like, all the time. So what makes you think that that didn't happen to Jesus? That's...
Because the same tools that we use to determine George Washington did not cut down the cherry tree, we use to determine, did Jesus really live or not? What did he do when he was alive? Did he die on a cross? Did he rise from the dead or not? It's a study of history, which is a great study. And I love the certainty that you exhibited when you said, and we know that George Washington did not cut down the cherry tree. Why? Because we study history. And the historical record does not include that. That is a bit of folklore that grew up around George Washington. And guess what? We know the same thing about Jesus when it comes to the Gnostic Gospels. We've got Jesus in the Gnostic Gospels killing a playmate and raising him back to life. We've got Jesus making some clay pigeons and turning them into real birds. And we know from the historical record in the first century, these are legends, folklore that grew up. We know Siddhartha Gautama Buddha did not believe in God. Well, you go into the homes of a lot of Buddhists, and they're worshiping gods. Well, that's not what Siddhartha Gautama Buddha taught. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha was agnostic, didn't believe in God. Well, how do we know that? By studying the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. That's how we know that. So, we have ways called historical critical thinking of ascertaining what did Jesus really do? What did he really say? How did he die? How did he rise from the dead? That's how we do that and determine that.
Okay, so you're talking about Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, by the same standards that we know Jesus died and rose from the dead, we know Siddhartha Gautama Buddha achieved nirvana.
No. We don't know he achieved nirvana. But we know that he lived and that's what he taught.
All right. So we know that there is, that it is said that Jesus died and rose from the dead.
Well, eyewitnesses saw the man die on a cross. Eyewitnesses saw his body taken off the cross and put in a very, very public tomb, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, who was a very well-known politician of the day. He was a ruler in Jerusalem. So this was not a secret little tomb somewhere. This was very well-known, tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. A stone was rolled in front, a Roman guard was set. So we know that this happened.
Is this mentioned anywhere outside of the Bible?
Yes, Josephus, the Jewish historian, talks about Jesus dying on a cross and supposedly rising from the dead, that was what was taught.
Does he say that was what supposedly happened?
No, he's pretty direct. He says, the guy rose from the dead. And the question is, well, then why wasn't Josephus a follower of Christ? So it's a hard question when it comes to what was going on there with Josephus. But he writes about it, about Jesus as an historical person. The letters of Paul were written between 48, 9, and 60 AD. So you've got Paul writing 1 Corinthians 15, where he writes that Jesus, he writes,
What I received, I passed on to you as of first importance. That Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised to life on the third day according to the scriptures, that he appeared to Peter, James, the other apostles, and then he appeared to over 500 people who saw him risen from the dead. So Paul is writing this in about 50, 51, 52 AD, 20 years after the fact. The gap between 1 Corinthians 15 and the events of Jesus' death and resurrection is about 20 years at the most. There's no time there for legend to grow up. It's reportage. These are the facts, the historical facts. This is what happened. Answer the question, where do we come from? I'm insisting, because of how intricately designed you are, random mutations and natural selection are not enough to explain how you came about. There's got to be an intelligent mind.
Suggesting that it doesn't explain the origin of life, or it doesn't explain the diversity of species, because that's two different things.
Well, obviously, I'm convinced that random mutations and natural selection have no ability to answer the question, where does life come from?
But do you think that it explains the diversity of species?
I think that random mutations and natural selection helps us understand what Darwin did with pigeons. Pigeons. He took great pigeons and bred them to be beautifully plumed birds. But then you see, he extrapolated, and that's where I think he made a big mistake. He extrapolated thinking that, well, if I can do this in a few years, take pigeons, breed them in such a way that they develop beautiful feathers, that if you had thousands of years, then obviously a fish could become a human being.
Not thousands, millions.
Millions?
Yeah.
Fine.
And
But
that's mathematically rational. If you look at, I don't know if you've ever taken calculus classes or any higher math, but whenever you look at things like limits and using mathematical concepts like infinity, if you apply infinity to something, and I'm using infinity as an example. Obviously, millions of years wouldn't be infinity,
right.
But it could still have the same capability. So let me go back to my example. In math, if you have infinity, numbers eventually become so. If you take the number 0.99999 continue, that number is equal to 1. It is mathematically equal to 1, even though you write it differently, because that's how limits work. It eventually becomes that other number. If you spread something out over enough time,
Right. Because when you study evolution, when you study science, you realize there is no scientific evidence that there's a process that creates. Yes, there's a process that adapts, like diseases adapt to antibiotics.
But back to the fishes, saying that the fish could never become a human. You're saying that. So where's this difference between creates and adapts? So I'm not saying that a fish creates a person, clearly. So you're saying that a fish couldn't evolve into a person. Go into that, not about creation, because that's why I established first that we were discussing whether or not that we were discussing diversity of species or origin of life. Because origin of life aside, we're talking about diversity of species.
Okay, and I answered you on the origin of life.
I'm not worried about the origin of life. I'm talking about diversity.
So do you believe God exists?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't see it any different than mythologies that we've proven false in the past. We look at Greek mythology. For them, whenever they saw a storm, that was because Poseidon was angry, or whenever lightning came down, Zeus was angry. But now we dismiss it as mythology because we have scientific proof that's contrary to that, that contradicts that. And just because we don't have any scientific proof that contradicts today's religions doesn't necessarily mean that they should just be accepted because it's what we've been told.
Right. So I ask you to relax your mind, try and move your biases out of the way, and realize that I'm not saying I believe God exists because God speaks when it thunders. No, I've never said that. Instead, what I'm saying is, I believe that God exists because the evidence is life comes from life.
So I don't want to debate whether or not God exists. That was just my personal opinion. I want to go back to diversity of species. I don't want to spread. I don't want to change the topics and get things mixed and matched. Let's go back to diversity of species and how whether or not, one organism can become a completely separate organism.
I am totally open to one organism becoming another organism. Okay?
All right.
No problem. Francis Collins, head of the Human Genome Project, is a deeply committed follower of Christ, a solid theist, and he believes in evolution, including not just microevolution, but macroevolution. I personally don't see enough evidence to support macroevolution. I see tons of evidence to support microevolution, so I firmly believe in microevolution, but macroevolution, I don't think there's a solid enough evidence to support it. But there's no problem with macroevolution for many followers of Christ because they understand this incredible process of evolution demands an intelligent mind behind it all, some type of God.
So do you not believe that the species Homo sapien is the descendant of a common ancestor to other separate species like apes?
If you can show me a fossil record that shows from ape to man, I would believe it. But there is no solid fossil record of ape to man. Absolutely not. That is a lie. Anybody tells you that there's a solid fossil record of ape evolving to man, they're lying through their teeth. It's speculation, and obviously it's in our textbooks, but there is no solid
We have
fossil record. No, it is not. There's none. None whatsoever. Now, I'm open to it, and if archaeologists undig different species, that's great. Now, what do you think about Jesus Christ?
I'm not educated on this. I know
All right. Well, you're educated about Greek mythology, so why are you educated about Greek mythology
I'm not.
and not about Jesus Christ?
I know that very.
You talked about Poseidon.
Yeah, that's
All right. So what about Jesus? What do you think about him?
Knowledge that was the belief. I haven't read, academic journals on Jesus Christ or Greek mythology or any of that.
All right. Would you be open to
on evolution?
Would you be open to reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the historical source documents about Jesus of Nazareth?
I'll read a case study about your religion. I'll read academic journals on your religion if you can provide me those. I won't just read your holy book and take it as a fact.
No, you don't have to read any holy book. I didn't ask you to believe the Bible's the Word of God. I just said Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, historically reliable documents.
Is it?
Yes.
How can you state so confidently that these are reliable?
Good.
These facts.
Thanks for asking that question. Because I have tests that I use on any document that claims to be historically reliable. I would encourage you to come up with your own tests. My tests are 4 in number: internal consistency, literary style, genre, archaeological evidence, and manuscript evidence. First off, internal consistency, meaning by that, are there contradictions within the text that point to massive confusion? No. When you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
What about things like the age of the earth or the flooding of the earth, which are... so I don't know if those are in specific books.
No, they're not in the Gospels. Not found there. That's in the Old Testament. Okay, so we're trying to find out about an historical figure, Jesus of Nazareth. So we're not reading the Old Testament because that was written before Jesus was even born. Instead, we're reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the historical eyewitness documents of Jesus of Nazareth. So the first test was internal consistency, and the Gospels passed with flying colors. The second test is literary style. Is it once upon a time in the land of Nod, Wynken, Blynken, and Nod took a boat ride? No. It's at this time, in this place, Jesus said this, he did that. It reads like the New York Times or the LA Times. Third test, archaeology. Are we talking about the island of Atlantis out in the ocean that none of us can verify? No. We're talking about Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Rome, archaeologically verifiable places. Fourth test, what manuscript evidence is there that we have what the authors wrote? Today, the New Testament in English is based on over 5,700 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscripts dated from the 2nd to the 10th century AD, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. Take those four tests, put them together. The overwhelming evidence is not that the Bible is a word of God. It's impossible to show. Instead, simply, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are historically reliable. So read them as history. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I was wondering, the other 8 apostles, they never wrote anything down? There's no record of what they had to say?
I'm sure they wrote things down, but no, we do not have an accurate record of what they wrote.
I wonder why that is.
I do not know. I mean, why do we have 4 Gospels? Why not 3 or 2 or 1 or 5 or 6? I do not know. But I do know the tests that were used to decipher between the Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, versus Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And those tests were 3 in number. First of all, was it written by an eyewitness or by someone who knew an eyewitness? Secondly, did it agree with the Old Testament teaching about the nature of God and the nature of creation? And then thirdly, was it accepted by the worldwide church? And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John passed those tests with flying colors.